Amidst the ever-changing economic landscape of the continent, there are a select group of countries that stand above the rest. They hold the key to shaping Africa's economic destiny, and their influence reverberates across the region, attracting investments and, of course, spearheading regional development. Their success is Africa's success, just as their failures have far-reaching impact as well. And at the top of that list is Nigeria, which appears to be successfully maintaining its status as Africa's largest economy. Now, data shows that the country amassed a total GDP of 215.6 trillion naira for the year-long period from Q3 2022 to Q2 2023. Converted to US dollars, Nigeria's GDP stands around $278.9 billion. Now, trailing closely behind Nigeria is South Africa, with a GDP of 4.6 trillion rand, roughly $243.4 billion within the same period. Can Nigeria maintain its position and consolidate on gains amidst a plethora of economic challenges? Now joining me is Oladipo Ajayi. He's the head, fixed income and FX, Chapel Hill Denham Securities. Oladipo, welcome to Business Edge again. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me on this morning.
So I know that many Nigerians will struggle to believe that Nigeria is still the largest economy in Africa with how the economy has been doing in the past several months. Their pockets definitely don't feel like this is the continent's #1 economy. But before we get to that, Oladipo, let's go into the equation. What are we looking at? What's the calculation? And what are the factors that go into valuing a country's economy for us to get to a point where Nigeria is still the largest economy here on the continent?
Well, what goes into actually getting the valuation of the country's performance, in terms of the gross domestic product, is you consider all the productive sector of the economy, the growth that you have seen there. Then you also consider the service sector also at the level of growth that you have seen in those sectors. And if you look at Nigeria critically, we have the agricultural sector, we have manufacturing sector, we have the oil and gas, we have the communication sectors, and these are some of the biggest sectors in Africa. And don't also forget that Nigeria is actually Nigeria has the largest active population in Africa. And when I mean active, it means that also looking at the level of youthful category of Nigerian population. So it simply means that Nigeria has capacity to actually grow compared to any other African country. And population is a key factor in terms of growth. If you look at most countries that has a good number of huge populations, you tend to see a level of development in such countries. If you look at China, you look at India, you look at United States of America, you look at Brazil. These are some of the largest populated countries in the world, and we can see that also translating to huge gross domestic product because that is a function. Population is also a function of what determines the level of activities that actually goes on in an economy. Because imagine a country where you have maybe 30 million people consuming, and also now compared to a country where you have over 200 million people consuming. Of course, you expect to see a better level of improvement in the latter compared to the former, and that's exactly part of what Nigeria is actually enjoying.
Okay, so you bring up population, and I'll ask two questions around that, because there are those who believe that this position is really just based on Nigeria's population, oil, and ports. But when you do a comprehensive assessment of the country's GDP and its performance relative to other African countries, Egypt is second on the list, and you have South Africa as well. Is it more than just population? Because there's even the question as to the value of that population as well. So Nigeria tops, Egypt second, South Africa third, Algeria fourth, and Morocco rounds up the top 5. Is this just a population thing? Because we do see Ethiopia on this list as well, but they're further down in the top 10. But Ethiopia is the second most populated country here on the continent, but doesn't seem to be reflective in this GDP and this economic situation. So is it really a population sort of game we have going on here?
And also, we also need to actually consider, I mentioned population. I said population is one of the key factors. Also, you have to also look at the productive sectors in those countries. You cannot compare the level of productive sector in Nigeria with what is obtainable in Ethiopia. And also, like I mentioned, I also talk about the age of population is also a factor also that we also need to reckon with. And when you look at Nigeria also, Nigeria is the highest oil producing country in Africa. Although in the recent past, we've seen Angola actually pushing up very close to us because of the crisis we've been having in the south region of the country. But however, Nigeria still maintains that lead in Africa, and the revenue from such is one of the things that actually develop the country. And also you look at the investment that's actually coming into the country in terms of FDI is also a factor, because that also help in the development of the country and also help in the level of growth that is obtainable in the country. And if you remember, sometime last year, Egypt was enjoying that huge level of inflows from foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investors. And but where we saw the reversal, we saw the reversal when the Fed actually went hawkish in their policy, and what we saw was a capital reversal, and that actually affected the Egyptian economy a lot. And we saw the currency tumble like about 15 to 20% just in one day. I think that was March 2022. And since then till now, they've not been able to actually survive that huge shock because of the current policy of developed nations, also actually affecting them very well. And the same thing also affecting Nigeria. And that's one of the reasons why you see that Nigeria has been maintaining that #1 position, despite the fact that we are going through a lot of crises in the country. Those crises is not peculiar to us, is global. When I mean global, we saw what's happening in the Eurozone. The Eurozone went into recession at the time. And I doubt you can count 10 European countries that's actually doing extraordinarily well in such a time like this because of the global crisis. We are just coming out of COVID, and at the same time, the Russia-Ukraine crisis is also a factor that's also contributing to what we are seeing generally. So if you look at it in that perspective, you will know that aside population, there's also some other economic development policies that can actually bring development. And I think that those are some of the things that Nigeria has enjoyed in the past. And that's one of the reasons why the current government is trying to push in for more like total overhaul of some of those policies that will actually be market friendly and will actually lure more investors into the country, because you need investment for you to actually grow and develop the country.
Okay, so in terms of that, let's move forward from population. Even though if we have some time, I'll come back to that, because there is the conversation around a 200 million population country or economy. Is this the figure that really we should be celebrating? Shouldn't we be expecting more? But beyond that, you've talked about the COVID-19 situation, a recession that even Nigeria experienced, and a recession happening globally as well. There is also the Russia-Ukraine situation. There's record inflation, record food inflation that Nigerians are facing. Those things don't necessarily paint the picture of a thriving and prosperous economy. And I think that's how many Nigerians would look at it. But a report from the National Bureau of Statistics shows that Nigeria's GDP for the fiscal year exceeded expectations, with the country's GDP reaching an impressive $550 billion. And that demonstrated a remarkable resilience in the face of various challenges. So Oladipo, let's look at the sectors. You've mentioned a bit of them. Of course, the services sector is one that many people are now keeping their eyes on. But what sectors have helped the Nigerian economy to continue to be resilient in the face of the challenges we're facing, and even the sectors that have potential to do much more?
Yeah, one thing you've noticed that in the past, the agricultural sector has been amazing. And one way or the other, it has been contributing back to back on the development and the improvement in the growth in the economy. And also the communication sector is also a sector to actually reckon with because of the level improvement that they actually bring to the economy and the level of growth that they actually bring to the economy. Also, we look at the oil and gas. Oil and gas in the past, we've been seeing huge drop, and they've been contributing huge negative year-on-year improvements. And but what we have seen in the last report shows that we saw marginal drop, and that marginal drop simply means that we are actually getting better compared to where we were actually coming from. You will understand that last year we barely can actually produce 900,000 barrels per day, and I think that was towards the end of last year. But we saw huge improvement coming to this year. As at the last count, we were doing very close to 1.2 million barrels, and based on the statement from the chairman of NNPC, it was actually mentioned that we will, by the end of the year, we will likely yield the 2 million barrels per day. And so what that will mean that the oil and gas sector will also further contribute positive effects to the economy. And we also see more of improvement from manufacturing sector as well. And that's also a sector that we also need to reckon with, despite the fact that they be finding it very difficult to actually assess effects and the like. But however, it's still contributing marginally to the growth of the economy. And that's also just to actually corroborate the point you actually highlighted earlier on, that should we celebrate this level of improvement considering the level of population that we are currently sitting on? I will say no, it's not something that we need to celebrate on. We need to celebrate. If we need to actually be truthful to ourselves, we are not supposed to compare in our economy with the like of South Africa, Egypt. Maybe our peer should be a country like Brazil that has related level of population, and we are almost at the same level of in terms of growth and in terms of development and the like. I think that's one of the countries that I think we need to start comparing ourselves with, because of the fact that they also has almost the same level of population with Nigeria. So I feel that the bar is still very low as we speak, because we are not sweating out our population very well. Imagine a country where your labor force is fully, all of them are fully employed. You can see the level of development and level of growth that will translate into. And also to speak to those figures that you actually mentioned, the inflation figure and the likes. Of course, inflation is sometimes to show that an economy is growing, because when an economy is heated up, when it's improving, that's when you tend to see inflation rising and the like. Something when it gets to a level where you feel that this economy is fully heated, and you don't want a situation whereby you can turn to more like a runaway inflation. Then you start putting policies in place that can actually reduce that. And the end goal will be such policy will actually, one way or the other, be counterproductive to growth, because what you are trying to do is pulling liquidity out of the system to actually reduce the level of activity that will actually be going on in the country, so as to reduce the level of inflation. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people are suggesting to the government, that the government needs to withdraw some level of liquidity from the system, so that that one way or the other douse the current inflationary pressure. But all in all, I think the sectors, they are not doing badly compared to the situation we are currently finding ourselves. But I feel that there are more that we can actually sweat out of the economy.
All right, and I'll still come back to the numbers, because I have some numbers as we wrap things up. But another critical aspect to consider, Oladipo, is the base year for constant prices used for both countries. Now, Nigeria continues to use the year 2010 as its base year for constant prices, while South Africa has updated its base year to 2015. How much impact does the base year have when it comes to the relative values of the GDPs? And are we at a point in time where we should really be looking at updating that? I understand how long it takes. And at a point in time, I think it was about a year ago, we heard that Nigeria was in the process, along with the World Bank, of rebasing its economy and trying to find the new and updated value. So where do we stand on that? And in terms of this base year we're using, does it still continue to show us the real picture of what Nigeria has?
As we speak now, if you are now looking at it from the angle of the base year, it's as if we are comparing orange with apple when you are currently comparing ourselves with South Africa. Currently, South Africa's base year is currently at 2015, and ours is still far dated 2010. It simply means that we are still enjoying a low base year, and that could further actually show play to our own advantage. I also agree that we need to actually update our base year, but the end goal is that when the base year is fully updated, what that will mean is that will further one way or the other pull down our GDP figure, because what that's your base year. If you compare our base year in 2010 to our base year in the year 2015, you will notice that 2015 will actually be higher than 2010, and what that will, and as the denominator of that factor, it means that we'll likely see a lower figure compared to what we are currently printing. And I think it has to be totality that we need to also do when we want to do that, because I feel that we don't actually consider informal sector mostly in our GDP computations, and I feel one of the reasons why we are not doing that because we don't even have data of what is happening in that sector. And sincerely speaking, I think that's one of the biggest sectors that we have in Nigeria. I think when we need to actually update and actually improve, redo the calculation, we also need to find a way to actually incorporate the informal sector into our computation so as to have the true value and the true picture of where we stand.
So when we look at the GDP growth rate, we have South Africa reporting a real growth rate right now in terms of their economy that shows that there's growth. Obviously, it's 1.6% for the second quarter of 2023. Well, this lags behind Nigeria, which posted a more robust real GDP growth rate of 2.51% for the same period. In terms of expectations in this regard for the next quarter and into the end of 2023, what do you expect, knowing fully well that economic challenges continue to persist?
My expectation is that I don't expect Nigeria to actually grow aggressively above 2.5 levels. And my views are premised on the fact that we are still battling a lot of economic challenges. If you look at the issue of effects is still very much on the table, and that's actually impeding and affecting a lot of transactions in the economy. Just some days ago, there was a report that some correspondent banks and some foreign suppliers are also already rejecting our letters of credit. Not accepting a letter of credit. And so what they are trying to say is that you have to fund your transaction with immediate effect before they can actually meet their own end of the bargain. And we feel that this will continue to affect business activity in the country. And oil sector as well is not that, as we speak, we've not been able to actually improve aggressively in terms of production, although the chairman of NFPC has mentioned that we'll soon get to a level where we'll produce 2 million barrels by the end of the year. But I don't think that will actually have a great effect on this year again, because by the end of the year, if we are doing 2 million barrels, it means that we can only count that to be more effective into next year and not this year again. So from the oil and gas sector, you don't expect any great impact from that sector as well. If you look at the agricultural sector as well, we've been seeing a lot of reports of flood in the northern region of the country. And when we want to talk about agriculture, we look at that region first because they are more like that's their forte in terms of their operations. So we are not expecting any extraordinary or exceptional performance in that regard. So when you look at all these things, you sum up and agree that we are not expecting any extraordinary improve or growth in the economy. So I will be very conservative and I will stay around that, around 2.3 to 2.5%.
All right, so let me paint this final picture. I started with saying a lot of Nigerians will probably struggle to accept that this remains the largest economy on the continent, and it's a tough sell, most likely. So we're experiencing annual inflation rates at 25.8% in August, moving up from 24.08% in July. That's the highest rate since September 2005, and it also reflects the impact of the removal of the fuel subsidy, the devaluation of the official exchange rate, and even security issues in food producing regions. Now, we also have a food inflation rate, which has reached 26.98% in July 2023. So that's 4.97% points higher than the rate about a year ago. Phil is currently selling between the high 500s and the low 600 nairas, depending on where you are in the country. And we know that just a few days ago, the naira touched 1,000 naira to a dollar on the black market and is hovering just around 800 naira to the dollar at the I&E window. So for many Nigerians, this doesn't seem like an economy on the rise, nor does it feel like an economy that is in first place here on the continent. So when we translate Nigeria continuing to be the largest economy, what does that translate to for Nigerians? What does that mean in terms of the real economy that many of us are invested in and working in and managing each and every single day?
Well, the good side of it is firstly the fact that it could be a selling point to most foreign investors and most investors that actually want to invest across, maybe in Africa or some frontier markets, because it's more like a sell point when you actually introduce yourself as the biggest country in Africa. So it means that you are ranked above countries like South Africa and Egypt and the likes. So it's like a selling point to actually attract foreign investors into the market. Also, if you look at, I get the angle of the people, what they are feeling in terms of the prices of commodities and prices of things and anything. So we also need, aside the peculiarity of our country, some of this thing is global. Like I've actually highlighted earlier on, South Africa this year, their currency they depreciated, the currency has depreciated by over 20%, and also in Egypt, we've seen the currency depreciate over close to 30%, and also in Nigeria, we've seen about 40% in terms of the depreciation of currency. So, like I was saying, it's not peculiar to Nigeria, and that's one of the reasons why you still see that fact that despite all those odds, Nigeria still maintains its stance as the largest country in Africa. And also, imagine that the conversion is still at 4 or 470 compared to the current 770 level. It means that the gap between Nigeria and Egypt would have been wider. And part of the disadvantage is the fact that if you continue to allow your currency to actually prevent, if you allow your currency to continue to actually depreciate aggressively, the end goal is that you will lose that spot as the largest country in Africa, and that will not be anything. So it means that the brag that you use in actually marketing foreign investors will not be there again. And on the part of Nigerians, I feel that the peculiarity of the time is one of the reasons why we are seeing this aggressive impact on people in terms of removal of subsidy. Removal of subsidy is one of the things that is very necessary as we speak, and also the harmonization of the FX window. But I think on the FX side, the government should have looked into a pause before actually going that route, because we have seen that the currency has been actually harmonized, but yet the disparity between the parallel market and the official market keep expanding on a daily basis, and that's exactly one of the reasons why people are feeling that impact more. Because imagine now that the currency is still at 770, and the government is able to actually provide liquidity to the people. What that would mean is that the oil price, the pump price of PMS would have gone up aggressively to the levels we are currently now. Diesel is trading very close to 1,000 naira, and that will not also be part of what is happening. That would not have happened, but just as a result of a decision by the government. But I feel that maybe next time the government need to do general analysis before actually making decisions. Maybe if they have thought otherwise, consider that whether to actually toe that line or not.
Okay. All right, so Ladipo, a note that we end this conversation on, of course, it's one that will continue. Nigeria has maintained that spot as the continent's largest economy for the past 5 years, and it seems that we'll be holding on as it goes now. But of course, there is Egypt and South Africa nipping at our butts. Egypt just behind with just about $35 million, I believe, in terms of the difference for the two largest economies. It's something we'll continue to watch. Oladipo Ajayi, thank you so much for joining me on Business Edge as usual.
You're welcome.
All right, fantastic. All right, guys, we're going to move along now. We have international business headlines coming up and then a conversation as to how African economies can take advantage of an ambitious trade export strategy that the UK is launching. Do stay with us.